you. If we go to that's right, thank you. I want to talk about the challenges that higher education institutions globally. If you go back to the first slide, please. Thank you. Have been facing in the past 18 months, and about the opportunities that lie ahead for the sector. And by sector, I mean universities around the world. I've got the privilege to represent a really diverse range of universities. We have over 500 members in 53 countries across the Commonwealth. And of course, all of our institutions have witnessed differently how the pandemic has affected them. And one of the questions posed by our hosts today was, how has the pandemic exposed fundamental disparities between privileged and non-privileged universities? And how can governments and universities address this issue? In my attempt to answer this, I want to focus particularly on the very clear digital divide that has become apparent during the pandemic, both externally, but also internally within institutions, a double digital divide, if you like. And while it's a significant challenge, I think it also brings innovation and leadership opportunities. And I want to showcase today just some examples of how universities across the world have been addressing these challenges and building on them to create a better world for their communities. Could we go to the next slide, please? Universities are part of a vital education ecosystem, and ensuring equitable access to quality higher education is, we think, at the ACU, essential to realising all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations have set us. The pandemic presented a unique opportunity to realise the untapped potential of online delivery for inclusive and equitable education. Digital collaboration, including blended learning and virtual mobility, can widen access to higher education, including an international student experience at scale, opening up new opportunities to more students. And while the rapid shift to online learning was accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, there are new opportunities, but it also emphasised existing inequalities. The digital divide exists within countries and institutions as well as between countries. Lockdowns and subsequent campus closures have highlighted issues of digital access and equity. And to ensure access to higher education, the digital divide must be addressed. And this is one of the issues we will be taking to the Commonwealth Education Ministers Conference that we hope will be held in Nairobi in April, and the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda in June. While some universities have been able to embrace an evolution to online and use the opportunity to strengthen their distance learning curricula, the rapid transition has also highlighted major discrepancies in digital access and usage globally. And for ACU universities, 2/3 of which are in low and middle income countries, and 156 in India alone, stark disparities persist in internet connectivity and infrastructure. Next slide, please. We at the ACU conducted a digital engagement survey. You can see the main results on this slide in May 2020, and it was designed to capture the short-term impacts of COVID-19 on the working habits of staff, students, and university leaders. The survey sought to answer the following key questions. What's the current picture of digital connectivity and activity? What has the effect of COVID-19 been on online and distance learning, and how might this evolve in the future? How has research been affected by campus closures and lockdowns? What are the implications for undertaking research now and in the near future? And what does the segmented analysis tell us about digital equality and how this intersects with national contexts or other inequalities? And the result, as I've just said, highlighted a double digital divide within institutions where senior staff would have access to much better equipment than more junior staff or students, and also places to work. And it's not just about a fast, stable connection, but also the devices, data costs, and infrastructure to enable online learning to happen. And for what for some may have felt like a seamless transition, was for others a huge daily challenge. More encouragingly, though, the findings also suggested that the rapid switch online may have boosted perceptions of the quality of online teaching and learning, and looks set to last. The expansion of online learning in response to the pandemic and the huge challenges that came with it present a window of opportunity, not only to use the lessons learnt to build stronger, more resilient institutions, but also widening access to higher education. But this potential will only be realised if governments and institutions take swift action to ensure no one is left behind in the shift online. With online and blended provision set to be the predominant model for universities in the short to medium term, it is essential we begin to explore potential solutions to improve connectivity, address the divide, and assess the implications for equity and quality to access online and blended learning, research activity, and international partnerships and collaborations. Next slide, please. And in this, in the results of the survey and the policy that we're formulating from it, we recognise that students and staff want in-place teaching. The physical place, the locale, is very, very important, but so are the advances made in online learning, and perhaps we might come to that in the questions. In a great example of innovative leadership and seizing opportunities, we have wonderful instances of ACU members collaborating with telecommunications companies, for example, to facilitate the provision of affordable or free access to the internet for students accessing education-related websites and information, including Wits University in South Africa and Ashesi University in Ghana. More widely, there are a number of developments in online delivery that can really create a step change in providing access to both staff and students. Blended learning, for example. Globally, we've seen universities switch to online at an unprecedented pace and speed. And given the pressures, if you think about them, on higher education systems in the Commonwealth, the massive demand for higher education, yet the lack of supply, and how international mobility cannot be the only solution to this demand and supply problem. In Kenya, for example, student enrolment increased 11-fold in 12 years, from around 67,000 students in 6 public universities in 2003 to around 769,000 in 31 public universities in 2015. But the staff are less likely to have that time and support to scale up and help support the massively increasing student numbers. And just think about the potential in those student numbers. On the positive side, the current situation will accelerate the adoption of solutions that help universities address the challenges that they were already facing. Through the Partnership for Enhanced and Blended Learning, PEBBLE, the ACU has been working with 24 universities across 4 countries in East Africa to scale up blended learning, equipping them with the skills to scale, share, adapt, and convert courses to effective online resources, and with the skills to tutor remotely, enabling teaching at scale. The project was launched actually in responses to those challenges of supply and demand, but of course, during COVID, they've also come into their own. PEBBLE worked with universities to support capacity, and what was fantastic about this project, and what we want to replicate and do other projects in other areas, other regions of the Commonwealth, is that these really high quality accredited courses are co-created. So you're not busing in a model from one country to another, you're actually co-creating with local context as well as the international or regional context into the core curriculum, so that it has real relevance for the people teaching it and the people learning at the same time. Through PEBBLE, universities were able to share the resources, as I've said, and reached more than 11,000 students across Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania to date. The project is also sustainable. Over 170 academics have been trained in the design and delivery of blended learning, including the skills needed to adapt courses into effective online resources. And so thanks to this project, we're also now about to launch the same one in West Africa, and we're hoping to do the same across other countries too. In India, motivated by the direction provided by the National Education Policy, we're exploring a PEBBLE-inspired project for the state of Maharashtra with the support of the University of Mumbai, for example. And the fundraising effort for this project is just about to commence. The objective is to explore similar projects in different states subsequently. Next slide, please. So blended learning is one great opportunity. The second is virtual mobility. We run a summer school every year, and in 2020, we ran a summer school in Ghana virtually, and in 2021, we ran a summer school with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, also virtually. I would say in the first year we learnt, and the main point was to compensate for the lack of the ability to physically travel somewhere. By the second year, I think we'd also gained an understanding of what you can actually do to enrich the cultural competencies of students and the kinds of friendships that they can gather. So the non-formal learning element was really strengthened. And we believe that although closed borders and national lockdowns narrow opportunities, virtual international experiences can be an effective and valuable complement to traditional physical exchange. And it's really important because virtual experiences have the capacity to engage so many more students than the traditional mobility model. and also give students who might not have ever thought of travel the opportunity to start engaging in international collaborations, which then might then spur on opportunities in the future to physically travel somewhere else. So we really strongly believe in virtual exchange, and I've talked about our summer schools, but we're also going to be hopefully launching a new programme of virtual mobility post a toolkit that we did in partnership with the Durban University of Technology. It's one of the several member-led resources designed to support peer-to-peer learning and the development of new virtual student exchange collaborations. Another example of this is that 4 Indian universities, including OP Jindal, will join others from Australia, the UK and Malaysia to participate in an ACU-led virtual exchange pilot, which will run over 8 weeks in October and November 2022. And this pilot will provide 50 undergraduate students with an opportunity to work collaboratively on a project that's designed to enhance entrepreneurship and intercultural competencies of the participants. But I also know that a nascent project that we want to embark on in 2022-23 is around early career researchers, skills, intercultural competencies, impact of their work. And I think we can do virtual exchanges for early career researchers as well, where the themes are more about the development of research and impact in their careers than it is about the summer schools, which are usually about academic themes and subjects. If you could go to the next slide, please. I want to move away now from the 2 examples I've given of how in the last couple of years during the pandemic, actually universities can take advantage of new ways of working, which is actually something that can be applied across the Commonwealth. So even in countries which don't have access, I think we would like to suggest ways in which they could get access, and programs like Pebble and virtual mobility programs can really help. But I wanted to also mention why access to higher education matters globally. And on Human Rights Day, I think it's a really important topic to mention. Bridging the digital divide through blended learning and virtual mobility is one of the crucial ways in which we can be ensuring equity of access to quality higher education globally. And it matters now more than ever and should be available to all those who'd benefit. But of course, access to quality higher education, despite all these wonderful projects, still depends mainly on wealth and geography. Universities are a critical component of the education ecosystem. And it was actually, I think, at Unisys campus where I was shown around the campus a number of years ago, and I realized that that was where Thomas Friedman wrote his book, The World is Flat. But of course, the world is not flat. The world isn't even round. The world is completely uneven in terms of access for higher education. We argue at the Association of Commonwealth Universities that universities are a critical component of the education ecosystem. Their role in strengthening and informing education policy and practice at every level, training teachers, creating excellent content, doing the research into how children learn best, leading educational research is central to reimagining education. Of course, universities' role in critical infrastructure, in basic research, in their work with industry is also essential to solving the world's problems. We are working with the Agence Université de la Francophonie and the International Association of Universities, so 3 global networks together, over 2,000 institutions, campaigning for the United Nations to recognise the essential role of higher education in achieving SDG 4, ensuring inclusive lifelong learning opportunities for all, but also in all 17, and to support and protect higher education as an integral part of the education sector. While the gross tertiary enrolment rate across the world is 38%. It conceals wide regional variation. It's only 77% in Europe and North Africa, but only 9% in sub-Saharan Africa and 29% in India. Access to international education is also important and continues to be during times of limited international travel. We will continue to be a champion of international mobility, be it virtual or face-to-face or blended and hybrid, which I think is the future. We've shown, and research has consistently demonstrated, the value of an international experience for students' academic performance, graduate earnings, and intercultural agility. But I also think it's time and incumbent upon institutions, and particularly those elite ones around the world, to recognize there is a risk of a massification of higher education that relies on lower quality courses and units, and an encouragement perhaps for students not to aspire to the greatest heights, and an elite system that continues to cater to those lucky enough to get scholarships or to enter elite universities in their own countries. And perhaps it's time for universities to think about the traditional model of a 3-year undergraduate degree and perhaps challenge whether it needs to be in exactly that way and how to become more of inclusive institutions. If you go to the next slide, please. This is our recommendations. We, the ACU, through our diverse network, are ready to work with our member universities and the wider university sector and policymakers to share and develop good practice in digital engagement, virtual mobility, and crucially, inclusion as we move to a post-pandemic world. International networks like ours and our partners have a really important role to play in sharing experience and learning. We are a leading advocate for innovations that support more equitable access to higher education. We've been coordinating a multi-stakeholder dialogue to make digital access to education a priority to support a more equitable future. And we've been calling on governments and policymakers, including Commonwealth education ministers, to, one, prioritise funding for higher education, making sure that the education from cradle to grave is recognised as important as each other. So primary education is, of course, a huge and pressing issue. But good quality primary and secondary also relies on a good quality higher education sector. Invest in tackling the digital divide. It isn't rocket science. Funding, financing and public-private partnerships can help to improve access to data. By the way, the ACU also has we've converted a lot of our grants to data grants to help students and staff and academics in places where they're digitally challenged, perhaps, take part in international collaborative projects. We want to widen access to higher education and lifelong learning by supporting these initiatives in universities. And we want to bring people together to come up with a common agenda for the future of digital higher education, providing a platform for institutions to share knowledge at different stages of their journey and discuss the common challenges, as we've been doing all the way through this pandemic with our webinars, which our members lead, where really one of the massive strengths of a huge international network like ours is the common learning that can be shared, the diverse experiences across the globe, but the coming together with common issues like the assessment of students or support of students online. For universities, our recommendations include providing financial and technical support to improve access to data and devices, identify and develop targeted policies to address the digital divides within universities to ensure no one is left behind, mainstream digital transformation across every element of institutional strategy and planning, while recognising that the ability to move research
are engaging in, obfuscate more and more. It's understandable that people talk about decolonizing the curriculum. That's understandable, but it's worrisome because if there was a bias in current curriculum, that would it be possible for the association to somehow think about putting together some
has ended, or the cup of tea together, or whatever, where you actually come up with all sorts of thoughts and ideas that are serendipitous. And so what we want to do, I think, is support the kinds of learning, pedagogy, and even collaboration and social interaction that we think is also incredibly important to universities and to places of higher learning.
Well, thank you for those observations. Yes, it's true. I mean, we can't go off tilting at windmills. The world will work in the way it does. You can't wish away these large corporations. We can't wish away the uncertainties that artificial intelligence would bring, but we could certainly, invest in to have, what's basically what you stressed earlier, which is to be able to think critically for themselves, and to equip themselves with the ability to make sound, practical judgment and cope with whatever comes their way, because it's really very uncertain what the world, things haven't really changed all that much. There's a lot that remains the same, but there's a lot that's going to change dramatically. And so very grateful that there's the Association of Commonwealth Universities and that you are its leader. And we dearly love to have you back on our campus. You talked about some of the benefits of this pandemic in terms of our adaptability to this form of communication, and we save a lot on international airfare. We save a lot of carbon emission because so many flights have not been taken. But to welcome you to our university, because I was to say that because squirrels and birds